Hey guys, how you doing? Just wanted to record another one. This one I want to talk real specifically about the basic income and what I perceive it to be for the future. Let's get the technical details out of the way just in case this is the first video of mine you're seeing about the basic income. I think we can prove pretty cleanly now with the basic income that not only is it affordable, it's actually cheaper than what we're doing now to deal with the consequences of poverty. Um, the PBO has said the basic income would cost $24 billion. We currently spend here in Ontario $33 billion in Ontario alone to deal with the consequences of poverty. Emergency services, shelters, food banks, those aren't free, they cost money. And it costs more to have them in place than it does to simply give the people the money they need to interact with the economy. And that's really what you're doing with a basic income, is you're re-enfranchising people back into the economy. That the rules of capitalism have banished them. And of course the capitalists attempt to moralize this and pretend like there's a moral component to it, when in reality it's just a banishment. That people can't meet the threshold, that you have to sell yourself into a labor market. And there are just people, and this is an inevitability, there will be people who are not suitable to sell themselves into a billionaire-dominated market. That's just an inevitability. And we shrug and maybe say, oh, well, they have a mental illness or something. Something that we can do to sort of wash our hands of it. So we know it would be cheaper to have a basic income, to simply allow people to interact in an economy without laying any consequences on them. And now, this one I found out more recently, and so I've been thinking about this even more and more. For every dollar that is spent on the childcare benefit, which is a basic income for children, it generates $2 in economic activity. And when I found that out, it staggered me. It paused me for a minute and made me really think about this basic income thing and what it would actually mean to the society. So you're telling me that simply giving people who don't have any money means that we get twice the money back. I mean, the conversation's over, don't you feel? It just seems to me like what we're living in and what we've been living in for the last 150 years plus is wage slavery. That's the system that capitalism uses in order to maintain itself. That's its beating heart, is that there are people who own the land and own the property and own the ability to produce food, and those people exist together in a single class. And they say, we will withhold this food and shelter from you unless you sell yourself to us for our amusement, for the most part. Perhaps there was a little bit of legitimacy to it back when most people needed to work to produce food. But even then, feudal serfs, they didn't have to worry about securing food and shelter for themselves the way that the wage slaves do. Feudal serfs likely had a good deal of say about how their environment was structured. Sure, you can look at the reigns of terror and things like this that definitely existed during the feudal period. But at least the serfs understood that they were in it together. The wage slaves are separated into little camps down to the individual. which is why individualism is such a popular line of thought for the neoliberals and for the capitalists, because they want to keep you separated. They understand what the power of collective movement is. And if you can be separated down to the individual level, that means you have absolutely no power whatsoever, and you are no threat to them whatsoever. And they understand that. And so the basic income would be a moment that it creates an existential threat for wage slavers. And that's the only reason there is opposition to the basic income any longer. And anyone who thinks otherwise is absolutely fooling themselves. That the people who have power are not Christians, they just pretend to be. When really what they are is Machiavellians. I mean, for goodness sakes, Justin Trudeau is the son of Pierre Elliott Trudeau. He is the prince. You understand? When Machiavelli writes The Prince, the person he wrote it for was Justin Trudeau. And he uses it. And is effective with it, obviously. And at the end of the day, the people who have power don't care that the basic income would be cheaper. They don't care that it generates more economic activity than it costs to implement. They don't care about any of that. Because what they care about is their status and their prestige. Their concern is that if you get a basic income, you will stop working for them. Because what they think is valuable to be working at, even though they don't do it themselves, certainly must be the most valuable thing. And they don't want to give that power up. They don't want people to be able to do their own thing or pursue their own objectives or live their own life in peace. They don't want to support that kind of behavior. What they want to support is an idea where they are princes and kings and barons and royalty, and they have final say in what is or is not acceptable activity to achieve on this plane of reality. And they only speak in this language of individualism, but they have no intention of allowing individuals the freedom required to pursue individualism. This is what they think for themselves. They withhold it from you as they withhold the food and shelter. And that's the struggle we're having with the basic income at the moment. That's the beating heart of it. That people like Andrew Scheer, who has called for the reduction or removal of the CERB program in the midst of a pandemic in order to get people, quote unquote, back to work, when what we're doing is selling ourselves as wage slaves to an economy that's dominated by billionaires, is an act of radical evil. That Andrew Scheer is happy to quote the Bible and read the text when it comes to condemning homosexuals, but when it comes to understanding that text through the lens of compassion, empathy, and love, he's illiterate. The basic income is a revolutionary policy, a revolutionary idea because it does have the potential to eliminate wage slavery. That it simply does allow a person to look at a capitalist who is attempting to attract you to sell yourself to them, and you can look at them and simply say, no, thank you. And I've really come to understand, isn't that what we want? Don't we want to create a society where people can say no to abusive employers without fear of their own personal denigration? I've worked for many terrible employers, and continuing to work for a terrible employer is exhausting, draining, and horrible in many ways. But you do it because of the fear and anxiety and uncertainty that unemployment brings. And so you spend most of your time and most of your life working for people who you can't stand, doing a job that you think is irrelevant, to appease people you don't really know and who simply view you as a wage slave, as a means to an end for them. And in your spare time, you try to find another job, and that becomes your whole existence and your whole life. And then along comes a conservative and tells you to, oh, be sure to find your meaning. Well, my meaning is to simply survive and find sustenance and try not to become homeless as the system is structured to manufacture. And a basic income would come in and ameliorate a lot of these difficulties. It doesn't cure all social ills, of course. Landlords will still jack up rent. Monopolists will still jack up prices. All of the ills that capitalism breeds will still be there. But we will have the opportunity as citizens to look at the wage slavers and say, I'm not going to participate in this task that is irrelevant and helps nobody but you, who doesn't do the work in the first place. So that's what I think the basic income is about. That's what I think that we should be laying at the feet of the powerful. I don't think we should let Justin Trudeau off the hook. I think he wants to maintain his power and prestige as much as Andrew Scheer does. He's just more careful and well-spoken. His objectives seem to be the same. We'll see if it's otherwise. But I feel like if he stands up in front of us and says, I'll pass a basic income if you elect me the Prime Minister again, I think that we should abandon him. Justin Trudeau should pass the basic income. He should pass the basic income before the next election. And if he doesn't, we should get rid of him. Because I think a man should do a thing because he knows it's good and right to do. Not because he knows there's something in it for him. And I'm through negotiating with these people. I'm through negotiating with villains. I'm through negotiating with people who want to continue fighting for a zombie economy that is still structured to destroy itself and us with it. I'm through negotiating. This is my demand. Pass the basic income. If you will not, I will find someone who will. And if I cannot find anyone who will do it, then I will do it. That's a promise. And I'm looking over at the NDP, and I'm saying, if I've got two people standing in front of me saying they're going to do something after an election, when one of them had the authority and the power to have done it in the first place, then I'm going to go for the other guy. And I think everyone should. And we should make it very clear that that's what our intention is. I hope you're all doing well out there. We have a hell of a fight coming up on our hands. Good luck.